Chapter 6. Negotiating the purchase price. You've called on several ads, talked with the sellers, and you've narrowed your choice down to one that sounds like what you're looking for. So you and your spouse, or partner, make an appointment to go see it. When you go to look at the home, take your spouse with you. If you don't have a spouse, get a friend or partner to go with you. I'll explain the reason for this later. According to the seller, the home is in good condition, and the reason they want to sell is because they're being transferred out of state. Your instincts tell you they're anxious to sell and are willing to negotiate. Blue jeans and a pickup truck when you go out to meet with the sellers. Don't drive up in a big expensive car, wearing a suit and tie. Wear casual clothes and drive a pickup truck if you have one. If the only car you have is an expensive one, park it so it's not visible when the sellers open the door. Don't try to give the sellers the impression that you're some hotshot, big-time wheeler and dealer who's there to steal their home. First impressions can make or break a deal. You only get one chance to make a good first impression, so try to make a good one. When you first meet the sellers, take a few minutes and let them warm up to you. Don't start off talking business as soon as you walk into the home. You're a total stranger at that point, so you need to get the sellers relaxed and feeling comfortable with you. Try to pick a topic on something they would like to talk about, and just get them to talking. When you can feel they are relaxed and comfortable with you, then start asking them about the home. Take your time and don't rush them. Also, keep in mind that mobile home might be the best lifestyle they've ever known. So by all means don't make any derogatory type remarks, or comments about their home, or their lifestyle. If you come across in a way that offends them, it's almost a sure bet they won't do business with you. If they're not comfortable with you, it will be difficult to make a deal. Sometimes you can smell a deal. I mentioned that you want to act and talk on their level. That's true up to a point, but there are exceptions. Since you might be entering a world completely unfamiliar, unbelievable to you, let me warn you what you will encounter sometimes. And we looked at a home one time and I couldn't believe there were people on this planet that could live like this couple. When those folks opened the door, I thought I was at the city dump. The smell was so bad it made my eyes water, and it was coming mostly from the sellers, not the home. You didn't have to wonder what kind of soap and deodorant they used, you could tell right away they didn't use any. You would have thought this couple was running a trash and garbage business, and the mobile home was the dumping grounds. There was just enough of a pathway to walk from one room to the next. When I was trying to step over boxes to check out the home, the woman said, "Excuse the mess, I've been sick and haven't had a chance to straighten up." Yeah, right. This couple had the most negative, depressed, down in the dumps attitude I have ever seen. They had all kinds of problems, all of which were caused by somebody else. It was obvious they had no self-discipline, no financial discipline, and refused to accept responsibility for any of their problems. This was truly a couple of society misfits that thought the world and taxpayers owed them a living. While I was talking with them, the thought went through my mind, you folks have been dead for a long time and nobody got around to having your funeral. So, there are times that you might consider ignoring my advice. But even though this home looked bad and smelled bad, I could see opportunity. I just needed to hold my nose and look at this situation in a different light than what most people would. Considering the condition of this home and the sour attitude of this couple, what chance did they have of finding a buyer, especially a cash buyer? If you will learn to look beyond the trash, debris and smell, you will get some real bargains. And that's what I could see in this home. Once all the trash, carpets and smell were replaced with fresh paint and new carpet, I would have a good money maker. So don't be too quick and get turned off when you look at a home in this condition. They're the ones that offer the best opportunities for turning trash into cash. When you arrive at the home and the seller invites you in, just start chit-chatting and making small talk. The sellers should do most of the talking, and you should do most of the listening. And listen closely for any clues in their conversation that will tip you off as to their real reason for selling, and how motivated they are. Try not to give the impression that you're giving them the third degree, but just casually ask questions on where they're moving to, how long they've owned the home, when they have to move, if they're buying a house, and etc. If they're buying a new house, find out when the closing takes place. They may be under a time pressure, which will work in your favor. Ask them what happens if they can't sell their mobile home before they have to move. At this point, you're simply trying to get all the knowledge you can, to put you in a better negotiating position when you start talking price. After doing this for a while, ask them to show you through the home. All the time you were talking to the sellers, both you and your spouse were looking around for any problems you could see in the home, such as a bad place in the floor, ceiling stains, broken windows, bad places in the carpet, and anything else that needs fixing. You don't mention these things to the sellers then, but rather just make a mental note so that you can bring them up at the appropriate time, later. The squirrel dog technique now, it's time to check out the home. This is where my spouse comes into the picture. When the seller starts showing me through the home, Joanne is walking over to a different part of the home and checking it out. Pretty soon she might say, "Lonnie, come here and look at this." I walk over to where she is, and she has a surprised look on her face while she's pointing to a bad place in the floor.
She says, "There's a hole in the floor here." I'll bend down and start feeling around that spot, might even lay the carpet back, and with a startled look on my face, look up at the seller and say something like, "Good grief, what happened here?" The seller's reply might be, "Oh, that's where we had a little leak around the door and I haven't had a chance to fix it yet." Then I might add, "Oh, then you're planning on fixing it before you sell the home." Now he knows, and you know, that he has no intention of fixing it. After all, it's probably been that way for ages. But you want him to think that he will either have to reduce the price to cover that damage, or have it fixed. While I am carrying on this little conversation with the seller, Joanne has drifted off to another part of the home. Now, let me explain exactly what we're doing. This is what I call our squirrel dog technique. This is the way it works, and let me assure you, it gets results. I've gotten a lot of laughs about this little system, but it works. Learn to use it. In my younger days, my father-in-law and I used to go squirrel hunting. My father-in-law had a squirrel dog that would rather hunt squirrels than eat. Whenever that dog saw us pick up a shotgun, he would go crazy, running around and barking his head off and getting so excited he couldn't stand it. Sometimes I thought he was having a mad fit and needed to be shot. But Old Toots, that was his name, was without a doubt the best squirrel dog to ever trail a squirrel. For some of you folks that might not be familiar with squirrel hunting, let me explain how we hunted them. We used a dog to hunt squirrels. The dog would run all around in the woods until he picked up the scent where the squirrel had been on the ground. Once Toots picked up the squirrel's scent, he would start barking and follow the scent to the tree that the squirrel had gone up. Then we would hustle over to that tree and start looking for the squirrel. So the dog had treed a squirrel.
Now just as soon as Old Toots knew we had the right tree in sight, he would take out looking for another squirrel. He wouldn't even wait for us to make the kill. I used to think that if I was Old Toots, I'd want to wait around to see the results and at least get my nose on the squirrel. But Toots was gone in a flash, and when he treed again it might be 3 miles away. When we heard him bark again, my father-in-law would say, "Well, Old Toots has treed again." And we would hustle over to that tree. Toots could find plenty of squirrels, but he would run us to death trying to keep up with him. When we came in from a day of hunting, we had all the squirrels we wanted, but we would also be dead tired from trying to keep up with Toots. If you happen to be a jogger, to get your exercise, just get yourself a dog like Toots and do some squirrel hunting, and I can promise you that you won't need to do any more jogging. I remember telling my father-in-law one time that if we could just teach Old Toots that he didn't have to cover the whole state to find squirrels, we could go hunting more often. If we could have stayed in a smaller area, it wouldn't take so long to rest up. And the same principle applies to finding mobile home deals. Stay as close to home as you can. Now, back to checking out the home. While I'm still talking to the seller about the hole in the floor, Joanne drifts off to another part of the home, and pretty soon, well, Joanne has treed again. "Here, Lonnie, come here and check this." I'm thinking, "Sick'em Toots, this time she might be pointing at the ceiling and saying, The roof leaks, look at all that damage up there. Soy look real surprised at seeing all that damage and might say to the seller, how long has the roof been leaking? Actually, it may not even be leaking. It could very well have been an old leak that was repaired and the ceiling never was painted. But it makes for a good negotiating tactic. Now the seller is trying to explain that he fixed the leak, but just didn't get around to painting the ceiling. Then I might ask, with a frown on my face, are you real sure the roof's not still leaking? While this is going on, Joanne has hit the trail and it's not long before she's treat again. Pretty soon I hear, Lonnie, look at the wiring on this water heater, do you think the inspector is going to pass that?
And I'll probably say something like, no, that won't pass. That's one of the first things those inspectors look for. They're really strict on the electrical system in these mobile homes. Then I say, gee, I thought you said this mobile home was in good shape, but obviously it needs a good bit of work. Then I'll say, and you want how much for it? The seller might have started off asking $4,000 for the home, but by now I can almost feel him thinking, well, I'm not going to get $4,000 from these people, I'll have to drop the price. Wonder what they will pay. All we've really been doing is pointing out things that the seller already knows is wrong with the home, but now he realizes that we also know about these problems. And now that we do know about them, we aren't quite as anxious about buying the home. Then I might say, what do you think it's going to cost to get all this work done? Asterisker, I might say, will you fix everything if I pay you your asking price? Of course he's not going to fix anything. If he hasn't fixed it during the time he's been living in the home, it's not much chance he's going to do any fix-up to sell it. But you've destroyed any idea in his mind that the home is worth what he's asking, so now we can get realistic and start talking real numbers. I'll keep talking and Joanne might say, Lonnie, I don't think we should buy this home, it needs too much work. Let's go look at the other two we called on. And I might say, yeah, I think you're right. So I say to the seller, well, I appreciate you showing us your home, but I think it's a little too rough for what we wanted, especially for the price you're asking. We'll go out and get in the car to leave. After I start the engine, I roll down the window and say to the seller, say, if we don't buy either one of the other two homes that we're going to look at, what would be the best cash price you could let this one go for, considering all the work it needs? By then his answer might be $3,000. After a little hesitating, I tell him that I'll think on it and maybe get back to him later. Later on that day, or the next day, I'll either call, or go back and tell him that we've just about decided to buy one of my favorite other homes, but thought I'd check with him again before I did. This is when I will say, look, if I could get you the cash right now and sign a purchase agreement, what is the absolute best cash price you can sell your home for? That's one of my favorite questions when I'm negotiating to buy something. And then I shut up and wait for his answer. The next person to speak will be the seller. By then it's a very good chance he will say $2,500. If that's the target purchase price that I had my mind set on to begin with, I'll draw up a purchase agreement and give him a $100 deposit. I tell him that I'll have the rest of the money as soon as they are out of the home, and ready to turn the keys over to me. What I've just described to you is exactly how we've bought a number of homes. In one case the seller was asking $2,500, instead of $4,000. When we first looked at the home and talked with the sellers, we found out they were moving out of town the next week, a real motivated seller, and really needed to sell their home. We used the squirrel dog technique just like I've described, and the seller dropped to 2,000 Singapore dollars, then to $1,500. This particular home was one I called on about an hour before we were due to meet my daughter and granddaughter for lunch. It so happened that it was located in a park on the way to where we were having lunch. So we stopped on the way and checked it out. We went through the exact little act that I've described, got ready to leave, started the car up, rolled the window down, and I asked him what would be his best price. The husband and wife looked at each other, and the husband said $2,000. But when he said $2,000, it sounded more like a question, rather than a statement, so I knew they would take less. I told them I was running late for an appointment, but would get back to them later. The real reason I didn't want to give them a decision then was because I had never done business in that park, and I wanted to go by the office,
meet the owner or manager, and make sure I wouldn't have any problem keeping the home on the lot. After meeting the owner and explaining what I wanted to do, he assured me there wouldn't be a problem, just an application from anyone wanting to rent the lot and some simple rules that he required. He didn't allow rentals, and no pets, my kind of man. Before we left, he even told me about another home in the park that was for sale. What did I say earlier about getting to know the park owners and managers? We left to meet my daughter and granddaughter. While I was eating lunch, I remembered that I had left my briefcase at home and didn't have anything to write up a purchase agreement on. I usually always have this with me in case I run up on a deal and need to make an offer, or purchase agreement, but this time I forgot and left it at home. But, no, when we got through eating, I asked the waitress for a clean placemat that I could take with me. The sellers had already moved all of their belongings out of the home and I didn't think they would have anything to write up the agreement on. That's why I wanted the placemat. I intended to turn it into a purchase agreement. We went back to see the sellers, went back inside the home for another look, and my squirrel dog treat a couple more times. Then I asked the question, if I could get you the cash today, what is your absolute best price?
Their answer was $1,500. That was the exact price I was shooting for, but I wanted the seller to name it, not me. Now they can tell their friends they got their price. It might not have been the price they wanted, but they were the ones that named the price, not me. I feel sure I could have gotten another $200 or $300 off the price, but the seller had quoted the price I wanted to hear, so I agreed. I once heard someone say that you should leave something on the table for the other party. So when you know you have a good deal, don't try to beat the other guy into the ground. They will do business with you again if you treat them fair. And you also might get some referral business from them in the future. Now that we had a verbal agreement, I tore the placemat in half and wrote up the purchase agreement on both pieces. Hey, I never claimed to be a real sophisticated businessman. We all signed it, and I gave the sellers a $100 deposit. I didn't actually pay them the rest of their money until the next day. The agreement was that the furnace and appliances were to be checked out and be in good working order, and we didn't have time to do it then. Let the seller name the price now. Did you notice I never named a price the whole time we were negotiating? I simply kept asking questions until the seller quoted the figure I wanted to hear. When he named the price I was happy with, we had a deal. I usually never mention a purchase price on most of the homes we buy. I just keep asking the right questions, and using our squirrel dog system, and wait until the seller names the figure I was waiting to hear. That way, the seller feels much better about the whole thing. They may not be getting what they were hoping for, but they can say they named their price, and got it. If the seller fails to drop the price to what I have in mind, I try another technique that I'll go into later. So try the squirrel dog technique that I've described. It works for us, and it will work for you. When I first explained this squirrel dog technique to Joanne, she said, "Hey, I don't appreciate being compared to a squirrel dog." But when I explained that Old Toots was absolutely the best squirrel dog there ever was, and could never be replaced, she said, "Oh, that makes me feel much better, thanks a lot." Now, let's go through another actual deal we did. This lady had an ad in the paper to sell her mobile home and she was asking $5,000. I called her and she went through all the sales pitch and described the home. She said it only needed a few minor things fixed, and overall, was in good condition. I asked her if anyone had looked at the home and wanted to buy it. She said, yes, but no one has the money. Several people wanted to know if I would finance it, but I can't do that. I need all the money I can get to help me move. When I asked her how negotiable she was on the price if she could get a quick cash sale, she said she wasn't sure, but to come out and talk. So, I made an appointment and Joanne and I went out to check it out. I never leave home without my squirrel dog. When we first walked into that home, I noticed boxes stacked everywhere. Learn to be observant and look for things that will put you in a more favorable negotiating position. She had most of her things packed and was ready to hit the road for Florida. The only thing stopping her was that she had to sell her home before she could go. She showed us through the home, Joanne treed, a few times. We went through our usual routine, but she still wasn't willing to come down very much on the price.
When we left, she was holding firm to $4,500 as her lowest price. I left her my name and phone number and asked her to call if she could see a way to do any better on the price. I explained to her that we couldn't afford to pay her asking price. If we didn't find a buyer right away, we would have to pay lot rent, advertising cost, and we might also need to make some repairs in order to sell. It would be hard to do that and still be able to make a profit. We left and took the sit back and wait attitude. A couple of weeks went by and the seller called offering to drop the price to $4,000. That was still too much. A couple more weeks went by, and by now she had another month's lot rent to pay. When she called the next time, she said she would take $3,000 if I could take it off her hands immediately. I told her that I would think on it, but didn't feel I could afford to pay more than $2,500 at the most. She didn't hang up on me when I named that figure, so I told her I would try to get back out the next day and take another look at the home and see if we could strike a deal. The next day I called and asked her if she would be willing to take $2,500. She said she wasn't sure, but she asked me to come out again and talk. So, we went back out to take another look. We went through the home again, and Joanne tried a couple more times. I then asked the question again, would you take $2,500 for your home if I can take it off your hands right now? She said she would. By then she had been trying to sell for over a month, had paid another month's lot rent, plus advertising, and living with all her belongings packed in boxes. She had gone from an unmotivated seller to a very motivated seller, all within a month or so. But still, I really wasn't sure I even wanted to buy for $2,500. So I told her I would let her know in a day or two. We got in the car, started it up to leave, and I thought, if I can get it for $2,000 I'll buy. I cut the engine off, knocked on the door and asked her, would you take $2,000 right now for your home? She said, in a heartbeat. This was about 8:30 in the evening, so I wrote out a purchase agreement and gave her a $100 check for a deposit. The next day, when she had everything out, I paid her the balance and got the title. Did you notice that up until the time when I asked her if she would take $2,500 for the home, I had never mentioned price? She was the one that set the price each time, and she had started at $5,000, and was pretty firm. But we were able to purchase that home for $2,000 by using the simple techniques I've just shared with you. If we had offered her $2,000 the first time we talked, she would probably have thrown us out and never called again. By taking it one step at a time, we were able to get her to lower her price from $5,000 to $2,000. Of course, there's always the chance someone else might have come along and paid a higher price and we would have missed out. But since $2,000 was all the home was worth to us, we stuck to our target price. If we had missed buying this one, so what? There are thousands more out there. So even though you find a home that's priced much more than what you're willing to pay, call anyway. Using this approach, you can often make a good deal, and get the home for the price you're willing to pay.
If you can't, what have you lost? It's still good practice, and you're gaining experience and a chance to improve on your negotiating skills. And of course, sometimes the seller will find a buyer willing to pay their price and you don't get the home. But better to miss out than pay too much. You can't go broke on a missed deal. Don't ever get emotional and think that you must buy any particular mobile home. If the numbers don't add up, and it's not a good deal for you, pass it up and go on to the next one. With over 9 million in the country, and thousands of new ones coming out of the factories every year, there isn't going to be any shortage of mobile homes in our lifetime. Get a trade-off now. Let's suppose you've been able to get the seller to drop their asking price almost to what you were willing to pay, but they just wouldn't come down anymore. Even though you haven't reached your target price, you feel it could still be a good deal for you. Let's suppose you're within $500 of what you were hoping to buy that home for, but the seller stands firm. What could you do to make the deal a little better? Try getting something in place of the price reduction. For instance, let's take the case we just covered. Suppose the lady absolutely wouldn't take any less than $2,500 and our target purchase price was $2,000. Since we can't get the seller to drop the price to $2,000, let's try for something else to make up for the extra $500 we have to pay. I might say to the seller, if I agree to pay you $2,500, will you let the air conditioner stay that you had planned on taking with you? Or, will leave the refrigerator she had curtains, lawnmower, or anything of value? If she leaves anything that isn't needed in order to sell the home, sell those items for an extra profit that will help make up for having to pay her more than you wanted to pay for the home. Plan taking. The washer and dryer. Try to get the seller to throw in next month's lot rent. I could say that if we had to pay a month's lot rent on top of what we were paying for the home, plus advertising, and then maybe not be able to sell for a month or two, that we just don't see how we could make a profit. In several cases, that's what happened. The sellers agreed to transfer their security deposits to us in order to pay the next month's rent. So try to get something else off value to make up for the extra $500 you will be paying for the home. Check the title 0K. You now have a verbal agreement to buy that home. Before you sign the contract and pay the deposit, look the title over and make sure everything checks out. Then ask to see a picture ID and verify their social security number to be sure that the seller is actually the person on the title. If more than one person is on the title, check each of them out.
Also, compare the information on the title to what you have on your contract. Make, model, year and ID number of the home. Make sure the title does not have any liens on it. If a lien has been recorded on the title, it must plainly state that it has been paid, satisfied and signed by the lien holder. Normally, the seller wouldn't be able to obtain possession of the title if there is still a lien recorded and not satisfied. The title would be held by the lien holder until the lien was satisfied, and then forwarded to the buyer. Check also for any erasures or alterations to the title that would make it invalid. Sometimes the seller will think they have it sold and write in the buyer's name. Then the sale doesn't go through, and they will try to erase the name. In that case, the title is no good and a duplicate title must be obtained by the seller. When you pay the sellers the balance of the purchase price, have them sign the title and deliver it to you. The title has to be signed exactly like it appears on the title, and by all parties on the title. Some states require the signatures on a title to be notarized, some don't. Check with your DMV to see if this is the case where you should also check the identification on the people that buy or rent homes from you. This is to ensure that you won't have a problem in the event you have to take legal action on them in the future. I rented a house to a couple one time and didn't check their identification. Later, I had to file an eviction notice and found out they weren't the people I thought they were. They had given me a phony identification on anyone I do business with. Make it your habit to do the same. Now I always check. K. We've covered what kind of home to buy, what to look for, how to find them, what to look for when you find one, and how to negotiate the purchase price. Now, let's learn a little about making repairs and doing fix-up work. I recommend selling in as-is condition whenever possible, but there may be times that you will want to do some fix-up. If so, you should know what's involved and have a good idea of the cost of materials and labor, so you won't wind up paying more than you should. Your success is determined by how well you can handle failure.